My setup on the Radiolink SU27 beginner fighter jet. My setup works fantastic on 2S and 3S. Once you get this set up, you won't have to change anything else. Alright, so I've got some pictures to show you, and then we'll take a look at the setup file. Alright, so here I wanted to show you the area that I cut out of the battery slot to be able to fit my 3S 530 milliamp hour 90C LiPos. I wanted to get, with the stock 2S LiPo, I had it all trimmed out, balanced the way I wanted it with the stock 2S LiPo. So I wanted to make sure that I modified the battery slot so I had the 3S LiPo in a position where I had the same balance on the CG, and I got that. So this is the area. It's the area that I trimmed out was the back area of the slot. I left the front area where it was. Since the 3S LiPo is heavier, you need to move it back a little ways to keep the same CG. So this worked out just fine. The foam was sturdy enough that I didn't have to reinforce that area. I thought I might have to, when I looked at it before I trimmed it out. So far it's been absolutely fine, guys. No problems whatsoever. I didn't trim any of the top or the bottom of the slot. The battery fits nice and snug in there from nose to tail and from top to bottom. So that worked out great. All right, here is where I have my CG located, and I want to put the numbers up here because it's kind of looking at the description of where the CG is. I think sometimes it's kind of hard to visualize it. So if you look at the outer edge of the air inlet area there, I'm 28 millimeters out from that, and then 22 millimeters from the leading edge of the wing at that point. And that gives, with a neutral balance, it flies absolutely fantastic. I like the balance. It maintains level flight, when you're flying slowly or whether you're flying quickly. Now this is all based on the weight of my battery, and I will have links to those 3S batteries in the show notes. That is where I have it balanced. So whatever you do with the battery slot, as long as you get it balanced neutrally, where I have my CG, I think you're going to be good to go. Okay, so now let's talk about the linkage. On the elevator control horn, I have it located in the outermost hole on the control horn because we're looking at it upside down here. On the linkage on the aileron is in the outermost hole. Okay, so both of the control horns have the linkage in the outermost hole. But I did have to modify it at the servo arm. So if we look at the servo arm, you can see, if you look at the outermost hole, you can see it's much larger than the center hole here, right? So they had to drill that out because if I remember correctly, the linkage stop, the post on the linkage stop, I think is about 2 millimeters in diameter, and I think those holes by default are probably only 0.8 millimeters in diameter. So I used my handy dandy hand drill with a 2 millimeter drill bit and drilled that out by hand, and was able to move that linkage stop up to the innermost hole. Now by default it came in the outermost hole, and that for me was way too twitchy on the controls. So once I moved that to the innermost hole on the servo arm, controls now are really nice and smooth. If you guys have watched the videos of this, I would say starting with the third flight on the 2S LiPo, that's when I had it all adjusted and I had it all trimmed out and had it flying the way I wanted it to. So from the third 2S flight I performed on this plane, forward, including the 3S flights, this is the setup that I had on it. You can take a look at those videos and see how nice and smooth this Park Jet handles on a 2S and a 3S. And I have plenty of control authority for rolls, for loops, for split S maneuvers, for Immelmans, whatever you want to do with it. So that worked out absolutely Fantastic. Okay, so I'm back at the beginning here. So now what I want to do is bring up my setup sheet. All right, so my setup sheet, and this is for the TX16S. I think I've already posted a setup for the stock transmitter. Okay, so this is for the TX16S using 2S and 3S LiPo. Now, it has a R8 XM S-Bus PPM receiver in it for if you have a Radiolink transmitter or if you have a multi-protocol transmitter. The protocol is Radiolink and the sub-protocol is air. We've already discussed the control linkage setup, so I won't go into that, but I want to give you my dual rate, my expo, and my control surface deflection. So on the ailerons, I've got 90% deflection, or a 90% dual rate, and you can see in the 2S and the 3S flights the roll rate that I have on it. I have 50% expo, and the amount of deflection on the ailerons is 10 millimeters up and 10 millimeters down. On the elevator, I have 100% dual rate, 40% expo, and I get movement on the elevators of 14 millimeters up and 14 millimeters down. So that is what gives me a really nice, smooth control of the plane while having plenty of authority to do whatever I want with it. And then here's where I was stating my CG location, 28 millimeters from the air inlet, 22 millimeters from the leading edge of the wing, with a neutral balance. I always set my planes up with a neutral balance. The launch throttle that I use in 2S is 75% throttle, and on 3S it's 50% throttle. On 2S, this plane has really good power. It has pretty good vertical climb, and you can do all the aerobatic maneuvers that I just spoke about with ease on a 2S. On the 3S, it is a cloud buster, and I will be flying it on 3S most of the time going forward. And 50% throttle on 3S, just give it a slight upward chuck, a slight upward angle with a moderate chuck, and it takes right off. On the 2S, I just put it up to 75% throttle, do the same thing, a slight upward angle, a moderate chuck, it takes right off, no problem whatsoever. It's an extremely lightweight little plane. And I was surprised that even in fully stabilized mode, you've got a good tight turn radius with it. So even in fully stabilized mode, you can fly this plane in a pretty small area. It has a very wide flight envelope. And one thing I like about these park jets is you can input a little bit of high alpha, a nose up attitude, and fly it around very, very slowly. And it's a very stable, very forgiving, very predictable airframe. I wanted to give you guys all this information on my setup. This is the setup that I have, where I have it flying and handling exactly the way I want it, and it is uber smooth on the controls. So anyway, that's a wrap on this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in the Tinkerz Lab.